and I should have done this earlier in the process of this meeting or this group, so bear with me. Pam Boyd, a Scio resident, good morning. Note, I'm retelling some information and I may need help from my experts to tweak my comments. I had an opportunity to spend time at the fire station. If I get angry a little bit, I apologize too. On Monday for a bit of education. I spent a few hours Sunday evening pulling together basics before that meeting. General law townships with similar population and taxable value as Scio. Tip of the iceberg stuff. Thank you, Chief Hood, Assistant Chief Armstrong, Lieutenant Baird, and Fire Captain Cook for their time. This meeting at the fire station was fascinating, to say the least. Right off the bat, I asked Chief Hood what were his top priorities for what he needs. 1, safety of the firefighter. 2, enough people and equipment to fight the fire. 3, service to the community. If it isn't our motto, it should be, always be prepared for the worst possible situation. Do you know, and Bob Hyde, help me with this. Do you know when the Planning Commission gives a recommendation for a variance of height of a building, they will pass it if it has fire suppression equipment? Also, because we can always call the city of Ann Arbor to come help. Let's use Holiday Inn Express as an example. It's 3 stories and it got a pass. And there is no way we can fight that fire on our own. And case in point, and Chief Hood, I think you went to this fire. This was a fire in a building downtown because of a battery. Sprinklers helped contain the fire, but smoke and water affected numerous, causing estimated damage of $200,000. Then there was this at a hotel, carbon monoxide, an employee died. So your equipment in your building is only good as because next. Do you know that in the last year, Assistant Chief Armstrong inspected 100 businesses and their fire suppression equipment, and only 2 of them passed? So we give a pass to a taller building because they have fire suppression equipment. But we have 2 more years to catch up inspecting Scio businesses. If I remember Chief Hood's presentation from a year ago, it also means we have approximately a 3-year cycle of inspections of any one business. When issues such as those 2 articles, we have to ask the questions, do we have the equipment to take care of our emergencies, or do we have to wait for a better equipped fire department to do our job for us? And no ill will intended to any fire department staff in our department or others. Let's go a bit deeper into the tall building scenario. Ann Arbor has changed the zoning to allow tall buildings on Stadium Boulevard. If they have a tall building fire, Scio might be the closest engine on any given day. We have no ladder truck. Will they call Chelsea instead? And I hate to say it, but what Ann Arbor wants, Scio tends to follow. There's already been talk of allowing multi-story buildings along Jackson Road for higher density living. We have, I think, a 3-story building located at Woodhill Project on Jackson near Baker, and at least a 2-story building with Heritage Woods on Baker at Marshall. Again, we have no ladder truck. Along those lines, who takes care of our fire hydrants? I saw a pretty picture of a fire hydrant 3/4 buried in the dirt. I believe it was Parker Road. Until we have enough utilities help, 1 or 2 of our firefighters would need to dig it out if they needed to use it. Individual safety. A truck and 2 firefighters show up to a fire. It's contained to the laundry room. Homeowner doesn't understand why we aren't going in to put it out and save her house. There are rules. 2 inside, 2 outside for safety, but they only have 2 that have arrived, so they have to wait for the other 2 that are on their way. But the homeowner is beside herself with hysterics. The 2 decide to throw water as close as they dare, go into the house, and still be in compliance. But it really needs to be manned closer, so they inch further in, a bit further, and they cross that red line, so they go all in. And they're called out on it. But the homeowner is yelling at them to do something. What do you want those firefighters to do? Have you committee members put yourself into their shoes as you make the recommendations on the number of firefighters and equipment we should budget for? Safety of the firefighter is not just equipment, it's also people to staff our stations. There was a time when Scio Township was not called on by other fire stations to help because we could only send in a truck with one person. Do you know that that one person always needs to be with the truck in case the truck needs to be moved or other truck needs? Scio was skipped over because much of what is needed is the firefighters themselves to fill or replace crew as needed. Equipment for safety. Do you know that many times 2 fire trucks are needed at a car fire on the highway? One truck needs to block traffic while the other is a rescue crew. And how many times have you seen additional fender bender because someone was more interested in watching what was burning and not their own driving? Do you know that the major fires, that with a major fire Scio calls in other fire departments for help 100% of the time for major fires in our township, 25% of the time for lesser issues? Has anyone asked Chief Hood how many times they have called a department to help only to find the closest available department is 30 minutes away? Was this the topic where the words resource starvation was mentioned? Do you know how many times a year Scio was called to shut down eastbound I-94 to control traffic because of an accident on 94 at Jackson? What happens if at that same time we have an accident on the other side of our township, especially in winter? Now what? The answers to some of these questions is too many times the other departments are busy with their own issues to help staff hours. There is so much more of the small nuances that I learned in this 2-hour meeting. I'm going back Thursday for another one. I also made a list of in the way of fire departments. It's a work in progress. All that information, it's a work in progress, are in these folders for you to look at if you care.
I'm still holding the list.
Are you on Wi-Fi?
Oh, good. We're rolling again. What mine is?
I'm not sure.
This is vintage. It seems to be working. It froze every once in a while, but it's okay.
Wi-Fi.
Oh.
Awesome. It's my action pose.
And I know I'm running out of comment time, but I briefly want to discuss ISOs.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So I have several articles in here that list Michigan townships. Most of the townships in this grouping have better ratings than Scio Township. And it's not the end all and be all, but working toward a better rating will get attention of residents to get behind an SAD. I was only able to talk to one fire chief, Chief Bob of Bedford Township. They have a hydrant rating of 5 and a non-hydrant rating of 8. Oh, can you imagine the December ISO report will think of our buried fire hydrant that I spoke about earlier? I haven't even begun to talk about MFRs, EMSs, ALSs, and BLSs. We need them all. We need them all. But I think we need to balance those needs while we still have HVA for the moment and make a plan, an all-inclusive plan that involves a second building and the equipment, the 3-letter acronyms, and the people to go with it. Thank you. But this morning I woke up and I realized I wasn't done with my comments to you. P.S. When I woke up this morning and thought more about our ISO rating versus Chief Bob's. Chief Bob is in Temperance, Michigan, farm country. No offense, but backwater country with lots of dirt roads and nothing but fields for miles. I get his ISO rating. Our ISO should be so much better, and it's not. And I realized more succinctly what the guys were telling me on Monday. We are behind the 8 ball. We've been behind the 8 ball since just after 1988, when our township officials, after spending money building our fire station and staffing our building with personnel and equipment, then essentially told them, don't ask us for more money. You have everything you need. That mindset continued for years. There was no long-term plan to fund repairs for equipment or to replace equipment as needed, and that mentality, don't ask us for more money, has continued to this day and hurt us. We really have 30 years of catching up to do on our since when our fire station was founded. Our township was remiss, and now we have to pay the piper. Our fire station is beloved depending on who you talk to, but it's short at least one building, short staff, short equipment, short morale on many past occasions, and mistreated when you really understand how badly the station had fallen into disrepair. You residents, your residents, not just committee members, have to expand your thinking to understand what a giant step forward this township needs in order to bring our fire station into the 21st century. I want to thank Chief Hood for taking us on when you became our fire chief. We were not just a fire station, we were a damaged house reno with a good foundation in our long-term assistant chief and our firefighters. Chief, you have slowly been building us into to be a house that Scio residents can be proud of, but it's going to cost us because we didn't pay for it back when we should have. Thank you again.
Thanks, Pam. Is anyone, I guess, Terry, can you see if anybody's has their hand raised?
I can see.
Oh, you can see? Okay.
Yeah.
Does anyone have their hand raised?
Would anybody like to speak? Doug, Jillian, Joe.
Brian, can you answer?
There's one hand. Jillian Perry. Jillian?
Oh, hi. Good morning.
Jillian, could you please speak up?
Well, I think there's an issue because I can hardly hear you. You're kind of muffled and I'm looking at your midsection.
Oh, you are?
We're in a small room, Jillian.
Yeah, I know. I can tell. I can see that you're in a small room, but is there a way to raise the camera?
Whose midsection are you seeing, Jillian?
No, we're
Yeah, it's like I'm sitting at the table with you, and I can hardly hear you.
Why don't you just move the phone, Terry? We'll do it our way. Yeah, let's forget about the video and just,
well, if it goes here.
yeah. I don't know.
I mean, otherwise it's.
Yeah, I guess that's better. I think that will help so we can hear you better.
Okay.
Yeah, that's perfect. Hi, Chief Hood. Thank you.
That was it?
That was it?
Yep.
Okay, next up is Rob Pattinson. Rob? Thanks, Rob. That's it. David?
Hands?
Nope.
Okay. Next on the agenda item is approval of the minutes. I've read through them. I didn't have any comments. Anyone have any comments, questions, corrections, additions?
Move to accept.
Second, Mark. All those in favor of accepting minutes? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Oh, hi, Mitch.
Aye.
Minutes approved. Communication and/or correspondence?
None.
All right. Well, we did have a correspondence from John. That's included in the packet right there.
Yes.
Yes.
Just lost it. Ivy.
Next agenda item is presentations and discussions. So is this the time to talk about that or recommendations, or would that be old business?
Well, I'll say I put together a document that I hope reflects what this committee has directed me to do.
And it is online.
Yep.
Yep, he's part of the budget.
Okay.
No, your document's not up there yet.
Oh,
Chrissy can add it.
I can post it if I have access to it.
Yeah, or have Chrissy help.
And I will say, this document I did start working on, got together late yesterday. And with comments and feedback from our chair, made some amendments to it, which you all see under option 1.5 here today. That document includes the suggestions made by our chair.
okay.
And that's on page, bottom of page 3, top of page 4.
I guess the question is, have we all read the original document? And then give a few minutes for those who haven't read the newly added 1.5. I guess I'll open it up for comments from the committee.
And anything this committee directs me to modify, interchange, amend, I'm happy to. I will need to work with Mark to get finalized numbers for all these options. His analysis is far deeper than I can do.
Yeah. Take his work and boil it down to a number.
Yes, perfect.
Words to numbers.
And I think those documents are important to include as addendums to the report.
Condensed. Yes.
Chief, thank you for getting the party started with the first draft. Appreciate it. It looks great. I wanted to offer I'd like to take a stab at revising the review of the issues identified, the kind of 6 items, that section, to just kind of add to it and talk a little bit about, because those are really kind of our outcomes we're going for, kind of our metrics, and they're ones that you use in your monthly report. So I was wondering if it'd be okay if I took a stab at kind of reformatting and making it a little more like measurable, so that when we look at each option, it's easier to kind of compare, just like the numbers are, just like the financial costs are.
So tie the paragraphs back to the individual items is what you're saying. Number of the paragraphs to correspond to the items, and possibly change some of it.
Yeah, a bit of a edits. Yeah.
And I think what you're saying is you want to see each of these items a little clearly articulated in the options a little more.
Yeah, a little more, so that it's easier for the reader to say, okay, we're at option 1, and that would get us to, X on 1, Y on 2.
Gotcha.
And so, yeah, and just, I think that we should I guess the question is, the issues identified, I don't believe that we prioritized these. And so I would change them from numbers and just kind of have them as, metrics, data points. Okay.
I think it was my understanding that the order in which they were listed was the priority, at least I thought from the fire department, that these are the issues that have to be addressed in this order.
I
No?
don't know if that's fully accurate.
Okay.
I think we did talk about, meeting 2 and 2 out being a very high priority. But I don't know that other than 1 or 2, the rest are in any specific order.
Okay. All right.
And I think we might all rank some of these differently too.
In the board might. So bullet points, is that what you're after, rather than numbers?
Yes. Yeah. If I could just take a stab at rewriting this section, that'd be great. Okay.
In the PowerPoint presentation, we had a graph, we had a chart, which had the issue on the left and the percent of satisfaction on the right, based on each option. Is that something?
Something like that. Yeah, something like more metrics that would be tied to, similar to your monthly reports to the board, so.
Yep. So perhaps you could insert a text box next to the paragraph. Anyway, we can talk about it. Yes, Bob.
With adding section option 1.5, that took care of a big chunk of what I wanted to ask about today. However, we don't address that. I don't think that's addressed anywhere, but listing it as an option. We don't talk about whether we found or what the search for a property would be, because 1.5 involves a already built structure to accomplish this option right away. Otherwise, might as well build a second station if we're not going to find something that's already there. So do we want to talk about any search for properties? Do we have one?
Well, I think
I know
we talked about that, but
I took my grandson's bike to Wheels Motion, needed a new tire.
Yeah.
I took that opportunity to drive that whole quadrant, roughly from Liberty, Libway, all the way down and across, down to Jackson and across to about where the new dealership is at, the Fox dealership. Zero
what?
Zero space, industrial space, with high enough bay doors in order to get equipment in and out. Having said that, even if there was available existing space, we would have to build into our analysis at least a 3-year lease with 2 1-year options. Okay, and those numbers, I went on my various real estate, commercial, industrial websites, and it's going to be anywhere between $4 and $8 a square foot in that particular area. So, and I assume about 4,000 to 6,000 square feet.
Yeah, I think that would,
Yeah.
I think
So I'd have to build that into the model. However, again, I repeat, zero space.
Right.
That ought to go in the report. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
If we haven't identified one, we can put it that way. If we have searched and haven't found one, we can put it that way. But
Would you consider your search thorough or just scratching the surface?
Thorough.
Okay.
Both physical inspection of the area, desired area, and online search with LoopNet, CoStar, CPIX, and Crexi. Those are the principal commercial industrial on-site websites. I'm glad you did it. I figured you did, and we just need to document it. Yeah.
We had talked about possibly talking with Mark Smith about space at my HQ. Chief, were you able to? Or
I have not had an opportunity.
I drove the ground,
Oh, okay.
and their ceiling heights are anywhere between 12 and 14. So in order to have a high bay door, you're not.
Well,
At least office space there too. Yeah.
we don't need a high bay if we have just a rescue truck, do we?
Well, we're talking about putting the spare engine there. Otherwise, you can't do it right away. I mean, you gotta have.
Oh, that's true. That's right. We're going to use an engine rather than a rescue truck because 2 years for a rescue truck. Okay, I understand. So we do need, what, 10-foot, 12-foot doors?
12 foot at least.
So is it safe to say that there is no currently available space in the desirable area that we could rent?
That we have identified.
That we've been able to identify,
In the target area, I did not find that.
and that's with a search of real estate agents as well as walking around.
Not a,
Or real estate.
I own
All right.
So the only,
yes, an agent.
okay. You asked all the agents you know.
Yep. He asked the best agent he knows.
Yes.
Actually, personally, Swisher has one, but again, it's
No ceilings.
low ceiling.
I've seen that one.
Yeah.
So the issue, it falls back to the only other option.
Well,
Other than
not
plus another
necessarily.
10.
Not necessarily. 1.5 as written suggests that it's a rescue unit only.
I
don't think that was Bob's intent, was it, Bob?
Yes, it was.
Oh, just a rescue unit only.
Invite what the data tells you.
Okay.
So if we went with with a typical garage door and put the rescue truck down there and use the engine out here for rescue. Now, the question I have for you, and I don't know if you can answer this, 60% of your calls are medical. What percentage of medical calls, what percentage of those calls are in the southeast quadrant? Can you figure that out?
I've already estimated that with the Liberty Wagner intersection, that station would respond to, as first, it'd be the primary response for about 40% of our calls.
40% of medical, 40% total.
Total.
So that would be about 35% then of the medical calls roughly. Maybe
taking a percent of a percent.
A percent of a percent.
Yeah, that's it. Tough extrapolation.
Yeah, that would be hard. I don't have the data.
You have to filter on your heat map.
Yeah, and I don't have the technology can't do that.
So the LIDWAG would be the first responder to 40% of the calls that you get, followed by Steve coming in.
Yes.
You can't just use as your input just medical related calls and then see where the hits were.
Our software doesn't allow that.
Doesn't allow it to be filtered.
Doesn't
Totally
in that way. It's
export to an Excel spreadsheet, filter, put it back in.
maybe, but it's
Yeah, I don't know.
yeah.
Just a suggestion.
All this comes from a reporting software, which is extremely onerous to get any information out of.
Mhm.
I'm sure there's a way to do it. I don't have the expertise to do so.
Right. Spare time.
There are canned reports available, but you would need a programmer that could actually get a more custom report.
But is the data that we would need in there?
Yes,
Okay.
the
Then
data's in there.
then we
We
should
can
look at
filter.
it.
I just don't know how to.
The problem with the software is you have to program everything.
That's right.
There-
This
there's-
is the proprietary
Yes.
thing from the old school, yeah.
There's a small built-in already run report, stuff like that, but anything else, you have, Doug and I took the class and you need to be a computer.
Can you
Software
export it
person.
into a spreadsheet?
Yeah, you can pull it out.
So if
You
you
can
can pull
pull
it out of
everything out?
Excel, we could,
Yeah, we can do it. Yeah, then we can do it.
we got about 8 people in this room, 6 of them can do it.
Yeah.
The issue is, of course, if we go to the,
But if we knew that,
Yeah.
what would that inform?
well, it would inform that we're solving 10% of the problem or 60% of the problem.
And that would be information for you on the board to consider
Yeah.
your options.
Andy, if you want to give it one
Yeah.
more try, I'm happy to volunteer with Bob. You know, we can both take a look. If you want to export a mess
Yes.
and then just share it with us and then have Bob and I take a look.
I've got a 5-year data set.
You do?
Yeah.
Would you mind sharing that?
Just export that and then
Let's see how far
send it
we
to the
can get.
group and we'll
We'll kind of poke around, see how,
send it to the group.
thank you.
Somebody will figure it out.
I'm good at some things.
You're good at a lot of things.
That's not one of them.
So the document you're reviewing is posted now on the committee page
Oh.
for anybody that's.
Okay.
Thank you, Terry.
So just Rob and Julian are online, not in the room.
And Pam.
Rob and Julian, the report we're talking about is online on the fire committee page.
It's on the fire, yeah, the fire services committee page.
It's a draft report that we're discussing to report back to the board.
Can you all hear us?
Yeah, they just asked that we speak up.
Okay. It blinked. I don't know why.
I was asked to be unmuted.
Oh, sorry, I was just letting you speak if you wish.
Oh, about what?
No, it just.
I'm writing the board.
You're fine, perfect.
Go for it.
Fine.
So Jessica has some drafts, or has some input. I have a couple of minor changes, which I made note on the original copy. And of course, Mark has to fill in those X's on the last page. Oh.
What I propose doing, in addition to filling out the X's, and I recommend this to all the members, is do their own red line.
Mhm.
Do their own red line. And, that way, I think that it allows individual members to thoroughly go through
Mhm.
this. Not that you need to wordsmith, but that's your opportunity. Either comment or red line. I will do a red line.
It's about to get revised dramatically. The structure If
No,
not-
just that section.
And then you said the list of options to match, to call it out. Oh, I thought,
Oh, well, yeah, but that's just edits. That's small once you get the first part. I like that idea, Mark, because it forces all of us to go through and, see where there's either small edits or big edits, and then kind of maybe, I don't know, process-wise, then we kick it back to Chief
Or
David and,
whoever.
Yeah.
For everyone.
yeah. I think also just kind of section-wise, the, and obviously this is some, kind of where the rubber meets the road is the committee recommendation, proposed ballot language. How much do we want to have ready? Does this committee want to have ready for the board? I think, personally, I think it would be ideal to have, the committee recommendation be as clear as possible, or recommendations. I also think that if there are any of the options that are off the table for the committee, that we don't highlight those as much as the others. Say there were, one or two options that, are off the table for these reasons. That can be even in an appendix, and just have up front the options, because I don't want the board to, kind of re-go through the whole process that the committee has gone through. Now, you can present all the information, but just make this report clear that, these are the 2 or 3 we want the board to seriously consider. And then the proposed ballot language, I think it would be ideal that we have at least some elements of that. And timing of when. I think we need to be very clear about which election, and I need to.
what's the deadline?
I can provide those for you. I'll email those out for 2023. I will say for 2023, you can have possible special elections in May, August, or November. And then in 2024, there's the presidential primary, which is called for either February or March. And I need to verify, David may know this off the top of his head, if local proposals can be added to that or not.
In 2016, we did have 3 ballot stops, Republican, Democrat, and Independent.
Right.
Independent, I think, only had ballot proposals.
That sounds familiar. So let me verify the dates and the possibilities for that. And then also just a little bit about the idea of whatever kind of enabling ordinance we want. That would set some, kind of assurances for the public about the board will have, the costs out for, 60 days of public review or whatever, something where we can show that we're going above and beyond what's minimally required by PA 33.
Is there existing language in the ordinance for to enable the existing fire?
No, there's nothing. And the, our code of ordinances is, it is probably the least developed of, most local, jurisdictions. It hasn't really, the zoning ordinances certainly have gotten a lot of attention in Scio over the years. The general ordinances have not, and that's okay, but we don't have, the only thing we really have for fire is, certainly, fire protection, fire service charges. There's nothing.
No SADs.
No, nothing about SADs or fire funding. Now, we're not required to. I just think it'd be better governance if we could put something lean into our ordinance that gives some assurance to people about how we're going to spend the money. Recently, with the Parks and Paths, what we did is with the Parks and Paths millage, there's an ordinance that talks a bit about it and kind of talks about what it may or may not be spent on. And then there's a policy on it, which I think is not necessary here because PA 33 really sets forth what it can be used for. But I do think an ordinance that holds the board for the future feet to the fire to really responsibly manage this year to year to year to year.
In the recent bond rating report, was there a footnote or a comment on lack of SAD language? If so, should we just take care of that right now?
You mean an SAD process and procedures?
Yeah,
What you mean?
yeah, exactly.
I don't know that there were a lot of things in that. I don't know that that was in the bond report. It's certainly, it may be. It's certainly a fair critique and
Well, it goes to control.
it goes to controls.
Yeah.
And the controls that we need are really over the board, right? The controls that the people need are over the board to say, hey, if we're voting for this money, this is what we want you to spend it on. And I also think that there's some room because I think chronically, and it pains me when I go through some of the old files that Pam has talked about. You know, I just came across this old memo from Spalding Clark before he was even supervisor, you know, just saying, why aren't we, you know, why are we socking away all this? I'm paraphrasing Spalding.
Yeah.
Why are we socking away all this money in the general fund, in this public safety fund, and not paying for basic fire operations? And I look back and I just see that time and time again. And so I think that there has been a sort of lack of awareness, leadership, whatever, leadership of the board to cut through some of the internal culture of the township that has operated so that the fire SAD is all the fire department needs. And as we know, PA 33 is written to be, you know, supplemental. Now, of course, I want this fire SAD. I don't want you to need any general fund money. But the principle of it is that, you know, fire is essential. And I do think because it's an essential service, we need to somehow, you know, protect and kind of hold ourselves to a higher standard for how we fund this essential service.
We keep calling it a fire SAD. Can this Act 1 or 33 allow us to do a millage rather than SAD?
PA 33 is just about public safety SADs. I'm sure there are, and I defer to Mark or anybody else here, that they could be funded through a millage or other things. We're not limited to PA 33. Yeah, we could do this. So we're not limited to the way we've done this. And I would be curious to know, and maybe Chief, you know, kind of when it comes to funding fire departments, you know, what's typical?
It's all across the board, right? There's a number of communities that use the PA 33 approach. There's a number that use the special loaded millage approach, and then there's other communities that fund it from the general fund.
Gotcha.
It really comes down to what the fits for the community.
And my understanding, David, I don't know if you have this history. I remember Donna sharing once that when we first did the SAD, maybe you remember that it was SAD. We did it to carve out the village of what was then the village of Dexter, who had their own fire services, because we didn't want them double paying. Well, they're long since a city, so that's no longer a reason to necessitate SAD as the only way forward. So I do think, you know, as part of our due diligence of how we would fund it, no matter what the funding level is and what we're going for, should it be a millage or SAD? And I think we should look at that because it would impact our residents differently.
The principal difference between a special operating village and an SAD is SADs are not subject to headley. That's one. And two is that you have to use it for specific purposes within the fund.
Within the what?
Within the fund. Specific allowable activities, financing activity within the fund. A special, it's a special operating village. It is subject to headley. And it gives you a little bit more flexibility on what uses.
But it's still special, I'm sorry, but it's still special revenue. It's still protected.
It is dedicated
Dedicated.
to that
Language.
to that defined purpose usage. You know, it's still specific to that, but
Well,
it's a little bit more flexible.
let's go into a little more detail.
That's right.
For instance, Act 188, if you do Act 188, you have to spell out specifically the projects you're gonna do, the cost, and when they're gonna be done. Is that true of 33? You have to spell out the projects or the people you're gonna hire, the
I
equipment?
don't believe so.
Okay,
I don't
that's
believe
fine.
so, but there is, in 33, there is statutory language that says you do have to define those things.
Mhm.
But it's a lot narrower than, no, it's a lot broader than the special operating.
And it also, you know, with an operating millage, of course, it's not required by law then to have the expense,
The public hearing.
the expense calculated and then match the revenue. It would operate much more like our parks does. And frankly, for a good fire chief, as the one we have, operating millage, I'm not, you know, proposing any one thing, but one positive thing about it is it gives you much more flexibility over multi-year planning so that you're not at the whim. On one hand, we want to hold the board accountable, the township accountable, that we're not just going to spend money we don't need to. But we could also build in those accountability measures through an enabling ordinance if it were an operating millage. I mean, I find the PA 33 SAB a little cumbersome. And then another footnote, and I will pause, but this all kind of comes together with the, you know, original implementation of 2008, 2009 fire SAD. When it was determined by the board then that revenue raised for year one would be held as deferred revenue until year two. And we've been off a year, I would argue, and, you know, presented this to the board. Certainly, there's an outstanding legal interpretation that we need, and that's where that's at with the auditors, is that they said, you know, we don't disagree, but, you know, we need a legal opinion. I'm not sure that it's worth it because money was spent. But that first year, what happened was the general fund just kind of paid the 500,000-ish, 600,000-ish for the fire operating. So that's why now we have this, when you look at the balance sheet for 206 versus the revenue and expenditure sheet, and you saw this play out in one of our recent painful Board of Trustees meetings when I was flipping out, because the supervisor, treasurer, and administrator for 2 meetings were insisting that we take roughly 250,000 from the deferred revenue for next year that we've collected, that's on the balance sheet as assets, but not booked as revenue, not in our fund, that we spend that to pay for the retiree medical costs, the OPEB. So that, you know, I maintain is not allowable, legal, or logical. But that's where that money comes from, is we're always holding, for about 9 months of the year, we're always holding deferred revenue for the fire department. And it's the only fund we do that for. And this is certainly, and I don't want to get into this because we should have Donna and Sandy here who would, you know, represent the other perspective of this. But I maintain that, you know, I find it as a taxpayer and as your clerk ridiculous for us to have money collected from taxpayers for a purpose that's sitting there atrophying with 1% interest and not being used, and not in a fund balance, not available for capital planning, not available for all these things. So that is.
And that's not the way the road village is done. That's not the way the parks village is done. It all goes in that year.
And the law is so fuzzy, you know, and the GASB rules, certainly the money spent, GASB, you know, you want to collect, you know, you want to book the revenue for the year you're gonna spend, I mean, that's just general principle of things. So this is I'm sorry I'm going so on about this, but this opportunity, whatever we do, a new SAD or a new millage, this is also the opportunity to correct that accounting practice. Because I think that we're all missing out by doing it this way.
Two questions. That brings me to two questions. So first of all, basically you're saying we already have $2 million sitting there waiting for us.
You do, for next year.
Okay. If this accounting change were to take place, would that money be available to offset some of the capital costs for improvements?
Sure, and that's why I went to the MAP in May, to the board, and got stalled.
And the effect on the taxpayer would be almost nothing because they've already paid that money.
Right, we're sitting on taxpayer money that I believe we should be spending or should be properly putting in a fund balance so it can be in our fund balance reserve. However, I would say accounting wise, there would be an argument to be made that the fire department should pay back that first $500,000 from 08-09. That's fine. 2 million minus 5,000. I believe that the fire department is still behind by about 1.5. And this is a broader kind of cultural thing for the township that we need to work through. Is it's not the fire department's money, it's township, it's taxpayers' money.
Yes.
That the township is entrusted to not just keep safe, but to use for the intended purposes. I mean, we don't pay taxes to have us sit on it, right?
Township as a fiduciary duty to use it wisely.
To use it wisely, is that what you said?
But also to use it wisely. And so this is kind of an aside, but I will say this problem could be solved by a PA 33 or a operating millage. It's just this refresh. It's a chance to fix that. PA 33 does not require it be done that way. And I just want to be clear about that.
That way, meaning hold it in reserve for a year.
Yeah, for nearly a year. Yep. Yeah. So sometimes when you hear like Jim Murdy talk about, well, our cash position is good. The cash position is good. Sure, you have negative $500,000 in fund balance, Andy, but our cash position is good. So that's all. Sorry.
My second question, if I could, real quick, Mark, can you elaborate on and maybe help the question, millage versus Act 33? Is one subject to capture for DDA, and would that reduce operating budget if over one versus the other?
Under 133.
Is it 133 or 30?
Or 33.
Okay.
Under 33, you cannot capture 33 levy, whatever. You can call it a rate, you can call it a village. It acts as a village.
Okay.
It acts as a village.
Great.
You can't collect it.
But it's not subject to the DDA.
Right. Tip. It's not subject to any tip whatsoever. No.
What if
Under 33, but under 188, yes.
Would it be 180?
Because or is it 180?
That's an SAP.
Yeah. Anyway,
Special voted.
Special voted.
Okay.
Is an ad valorem tax.
Okay.
Ad valorem tax are subject to capture.
And you can't exclude them in the ballot language.
Yeah, you can.
You can put in the ballot language that it's not subject to.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about. The first meeting.
Yeah, that's why I asked that
Yeah.
question.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
So I would want to do that.
Yeah,
Yes.
you have to have. So if you're doing a special operating millage that's considered an ad valorem tax, you'd have to have that language.
So either way, we can export a DDA capture if that's what the board wants.
But it would be subject to headland, which probably, hopefully, would be offset by the increase in tax value of the township. So their income would hopefully be the same. But the other thing is that it now can be legally deducted on your taxes because it's not an SAD. SAD can't be deducted on your taxes.
Oh, really?
Really?
33.
We all do it,
Yeah.
but it's not legal.
33 is not an ad valorem tax. or not a specific tax.
Well, I mean, that's a huge
It's
benefit.
an important consideration.
But it also is subject to the 1%. And 1% admin, which SADs are not.
Right, okay,
So a lot of moving parts there.
okay, this is
I see
helpful.
everybody's mind going like this.
Well, everybody's thinking, I've been protecting my taxes all the time.
You mean if you itemize.
Except Ryan, because Ryan
Right.
knows.
My big thing is to figure out when we capture
Yeah.
the taxes.
So much.
Many years.
My big thing
Yeah.
is when we capture it.
If you have enough money to itemize the, yeah.
If we don't capture it in the next year, why go for it in 2024, because then we're in 2025?
So that was
My
actually,
big thing is when we actually do capture the funds.
this was gonna be my question back to you,
Okay,
because you brought up a lot of great questions to that, then we sort of talked about some other things. When does it make sense, and I'm up for everything, but when does it make sense for us to go to the voters? I don't think. You said April was the first date. And
May.
I'm not sure May probably doesn't make sense, but when next year does make sense.
Why doesn't May make sense? Why are you
I
saying-
think I would be, I'll tell you 2 reasons why I would be actually opposed to May, firmly opposed. One, it's not enough time to educate and work with the community because we'd have to, push this through. I think it's about February-ish that we'd have to finalize the ballot language, do the campaigning. And I really think we need to do really deep. And also, with a special election, we never know what the turnout's going to be because we don't know who else is going to call for something on the ballot. Like there may be a school district, a county thing, something. Right now, nothing's on the calendar for 2023. I would be supportive of August, probably November 2023. I do want to look into the presidential primary too, because the turnout would be so much better. So that it'd be more, representative of the people. But the other reason why May would make me so nervous is because if we don't correct some of these more core financial operational issues here at the township, but by then, here's what could happen. And I hate that my mind is, I always start with, what's the worst case scenario? And then I work back. So what could happen is it could be ramped through in May as a public safety millage. It could go on the May ballot if it did. If it went through, then it would be collected as summer taxes. And people would be kind of double taxed.
Yeah, double dipping.
Double dipping. Because right now fire's on the winter taxes. If the township board put it on the summer taxes, if it passed in May, went on the summer taxes, we'd be essentially double dipping, kind of getting 2 years from people in one. And we already have this weird deferred revenue thing. So I just think it's fiscally, I just don't think it's responsible to do that to taxpayers.
Tell me what you mean by double dipping. Taking money.
Not double dipping, double collecting. So we'd be collecting
some
this
of it-
winter right now,
Mhm.
fire.
Which aren't due until February. Go ahead.
Right,
I
which would be
understand.
due in February. And then we would also put something on the ballot in May, collect in summer, bring it in September, 2 years of collection for 1 year of operating.
But I think that we've been taking into account that these numbers include the current money coming in as part of the mill rate that we're saying we need. Is that correct? In other words, we're not counting on the other. You rolled the current millage rate into these mills. Is that correct?
The 1.35 is in the 1.7, the 2
Mhm.
point whatever, 3 point whatever.
So we have to subtract off those.
It's not a matter of military, it's a matter of timing.
Yeah.
You paid in February and then you're gonna pay again in August.
But we
I don't
reduce
think
the amount
that's
that we pay in August by the amount that we pay in February.
So for example,
That's what I was saying.
Oh, okay.
just your easy math.
And I know you weren't. I am.
I don't think that's how it would work.
We'd have to ask for it that way.
We could, if we write the ordinance that way, that's the way.
But it does complicate it, but you wouldn't do it that way and take everything and then add to it what we already.
Yeah, well, we shouldn't, is what I'm saying. And what I'm saying is, we need a finance director, we need to get,
Keep it separate.
some, professional fiscal management here. And these problems will go away, but I also think low turnout in May, it's too soon, but I'm very uncomfortable going to the voters when we've just collected money due in February.
And we do want to allow the voters to get educated.
That's gonna be a huge
Thoroughly.
lift
Yeah.
for all of us.
Brian, you got something?
I was gonna say, I'm fine with doing it later, I'm just worried if we wait till whenever the presidential, because I know they're
24.
they're talking about when exactly it's
It'd
gonna
be
be.
February or March.
We wanna move it back from,
Oh, you're
try to be the
talking about
earliest one in the country or something,
Mhm.
whatever. Whenever they do that. The problem is if we pass it in, let's say, March of 24, we can't collect until summer or winter.
We could collect
You
in
put that
summer,
in the language.
put it in the language, so it could be collected in,
Well, we have the same problem because we would have collected in December of 23 or February of 24 for the winter taxes of 23. And then you're going to collect in the summer of 24. We have the same issue, but you put it in the beginning of the year. Don't we?
that's true, I guess, so then that might take us back to November 23.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good thing to think about, because you're
Yeah.
like, well, I mean, we do get more voter turnout.
Well, why don't I do this? Why
Unless
don't
we
I,
do what Bob says.
Yeah.
Collect the difference between the 135
That
and
gets
whatever
really
the number is.
confusing.
I don't
Does
wanna-
get confusing,
I don't
I'm
wanna-
just saying we could do it.
Let me suggest something.
Sure.
We can get into the weeds of this all we want.
Yeah.
But it's whatever's in the language, the
Mhm.
start date, the end date, and the collection are up the left.
right,
So let's
We
just
could
think
cover
that through, but one thing that I and Jessica brought up a good point. This point in time, before you get this out of the language, is the time to identify the differences in administrative procedures that we have, whether
That's
they are accounting, whether they're collection, whatever those differences are, bullet point those.
okay,
And then we address those so that by the time you ask the question in whatever 23, 24, whatever, you've addressed it in hopefully there's a resolution to those.
yeah. And I think, I anticipate that with the good work of this committee and new board members, that we'll be able to get those resolved. But why don't I'll bullet point those for the committee's
That includes the
consideration.
1.5.
And that, right,
Okay.
yep, the 1.5 and the 1.8.
Good.
And then I'll also do a little table of different dates, possible election dates, and pros and cons of each.
I really think we need to wait till you do this before we start redlining, because the language is going to change.
Well, there's nothing to redline here, so I think we're okay.
Just that.
Yeah,
A couple of times in the earlier meetings, I heard a mention of an audit.
Mhm.
Could we get a copy of this audit letter so that I can understand what the Treasury's issues are?
sure. Which audit letter?
I-
is that?
I don't know.
I'll
There's
send you
more than
mine.
one.
Oh, I know, yeah, I
I
can,
can.
I can. I'll tell you where we're at. Yes, certainly. So let,
You just said you don't have to go into it, just.
that's fine, yeah. I'll send you all kind of what Treasury has said. And I think what people were talking about was our plant Iran auditors
Yes.
in going into this year's audit. They had a long list of things that we're gonna look at. I will say they do have the draft financial statements. We have our consulting CPA looking at them right now, so I expect to get those back to the auditor by the end of the year.
Are those audit footnotes the issues that you're referring to?
Many of them, yeah, the ones we had last year and they have ballooned.
Do we have
That's
a
all we need to
response
talk
to
about.
it?
That comes later.
Bringing the discussion back to this, the report. The last page, the very last item is proposed ballot language. And of course, it's blank. We have to work on that, but I would also add another point, proposed ordinance.
I agree.
Because the ballot language, if we want to spell out in the first year we're going to do this, in the third year we're going to do this, in the fourth year we're going to do this, the ballot language is going to fill an entire page on the ballot. So what we need is an ordinance that spells out the restrictions on the board, the
Perfect.
dates, the percentages, the requirement of the fire chief to come and say, I need 2.6, 1.5, whatever it is, and have the ballot language to be fairly simple.
And David, what I'm realizing is even if the board decided to do an operating millage, if we found that was the better way to do it, we could still of this, but we really wanted to say, but you can only use this, this, and this, then we could probably still, operationalize that through an ordinance.
I guess we'd have to ask
As long as the ballot calls it out.
Jim,
Yeah.
maybe, I don't know if we asked Jim, think
Yeah,
of
Jim
whoever.
or Mariah.
Or Mariah, can the ballot language say we're going to levy a maximum of, let's pull a number out of the air, 3.5%, or I'm sorry, 3.5 mils, 4 mils, as defined by the ordinance X, Y, Z. You can't do that.
No, I'm
So that the ballot
hopeful
language
that
might be
we
3
can.
sentences, but the ordinance spells out how that money will be, how that levy will be applied.
That's right. And then maybe the, public education process is, it's on both.
Well, we would have to have the ordinance
Understood. Understood.
to give out to people. Now, I don't know, can we do an ordinance for a village that doesn't exist?
Sure, we can draft anything.
You can draft lots of stuff.
No, I mean,
You have to
pass
have,
it.
Public hearing.
I would say you would make it, like most statutory implementation language, the very last line is how you're going to implement it.
Right.
Effective immediately or effective upon passage of.
Yes, okay.
I mean,
Yeah,
that's
it's
what
no
you-
big deal.
Okay,
Yeah, we can do that. I'd be happy to work with
I
somebody
think
on
that
that.
would make the ballot language very simple and put the restriction, put the governor, as Mark calls it, on the board regarding the
Ordinance.
Yeah.
levy.
Good.
But we'd have to have all that together to hand out at every one of the meetings at the fire department.
And I think the working language of the draft ballot language, election date, and implementing ordinance should all be prepared from this committee to go to the board.
It sounds like we have a few more meetings.
Do you know, Chief, do other townships who have either an operating or an Act 33 supporting their fire department, do they have an ordinance spelling out how, especially the operating village, how that village is applied or living?
Do not know.
It's certainly a good tool.
We can totally do it though.
It's a good.
It's always easy to take something and change the name and change the date.
You know what also happens?
I like to make stuff up.
Is that we can revise ordinances, the board can, and they can't revise ballot language. So it puts the township trustees on the spot to manage it the way it was written, not the way they want to rewrite it.
When you do it in the ballot language.
If you put it in the ballot language, you've controlled it. If you put it in an ordinance, it's subject to change.
Well, but yes, and there's ways to make those work together so that the board, the ballot language still controls. I think we
Please
can do
do.
it. Yeah. We can do it.
Okay.
Just one point.
I think there's a responsible way to do it.
Okay, so we just added,
I like being flexible too, by the way. So it doesn't hurt.
I'm sorry, say again?
I like flexibility.
Yeah.
But I also like responsibility.
Yes. Responsible flexibility.
That's us.
Oh, I do have a question here. From the member of the public, from Jillian to Mark. There are rare in certain circumstances that an ad valorem special assessment can qualify for a tax deduction. Would PA 33 be qualified tax deduction?
Well, ad valorem and special assessment are two different. Ad valorem can't be a special assessment, can it, Mark?
Special assessment, generally speaking, under the Internal Revenue Code, are non-deductible expenses. Generally speaking.
No, what I mean is.
But if it's an ad valorem operating,
Yes.
then yes.
But what
Okay.
Jillian has described is an ad valorem special assessment. Aren't those two mutually exclusive? Ad valorem special assessment? Or
Well,
is maybe Jillian's saying ad valorem tax.
no,
Jillian, are you there?
yes, no, since Public Act 33 that we're using for the fire, it calculates based on the value of your home. Is that correct?
Yeah, the basis of the tax is based on the taxable value of your home.
Okay, so I just looked up in the IRS, and generally a special assessment cannot be a tax deduction. However, if it is, it says deductible real estate taxes are generally any state or local taxes on real property levied for the general public welfare. The charge must be uniform against all real property in the jurisdiction at a like rate. So this fire millage, because it's sad, it's a special assessment, would be uniform across the township. As far as per person, or right.
Would that be a uniform millage rate or a uniform amount of money?
No, the levy, there's a uniformity provision in the Michigan Constitution that says that, all levies have to be uniform. In other words, you can't have, different tax rates for different classes of property.
Tax rates, okay.
So we're going to tax all commercial property.
Yeah.
So the school.
Jillian, we'd have to go into the Michigan's corporate and individual income tax law and see how they treat it, because it may be different than the IRC.
Okay,
It
so
may be. I don't know the answer.
so what I'm thinking is that if this is, a lot of people don't understand that a special assessment cannot be a tax deduction, because, when you get your tax bill, it's included with your taxes, the township road. Yeah, so I got dinged. That's how I know. I know this. But if this is a possibility that the Public Act 33 can be a tax deduction, that is a selling point. Because it helps, every little bit helps when it comes to. So we'll look, Mark, if you don't mind looking further into this.
Yeah, I'd be interested. I'm sure this is not the first time this has come up. Right? In our first meeting months ago, I mentioned that special assessments are not tax deductible, but I don't know about 33 and 188 and
188 is not, because it's
right.
But that's why I'm asking for.
Yeah, and that doesn't
apply
here.
Yeah. So okay, Jillian, I'll look at Michigan's income tax code.
And I did ask Mike here, and he said, I'm not an accountant. You have to talk to your tax accountant. So you're the closest that we have right now. Thank you.
That's frightening.
I thought you said that you highly recommend yourself. No, I'm kidding. No, you're great.
Okay, we have
no pressure.
We've talked about this document a lot. I've got a couple of minor edits. Obviously, Jillian has a couple of medium edits. Bob has a couple of things. Bob Hyde has a couple of things. I don't know. Bob Grove, do you have anything to add? Brian? Lance? Mark, I know I see you writing on your document, so I know you have changes. I'm looking over your shoulder.
I do really like Mark's idea of
yeah, and Mitch, and of course Mitch. Obviously, if you have changes, we would like those as well.
Yeah, I agree that a table or a chart would be really, really helpful for presenting this to the board, because it's a very nice document and it explains things, but it's a lot of words to read, and a table could summarize it very nicely.
Would it make sense if everybody gave you their edits and then I sent the edited document to the clerk to put the charts into the spread?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. I'm happy to work to make this a little more visual.
I think it's up to us to put that chart, isn't it? Pulling them from that PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Because I don't know that the clerk would have the detailed knowledge to see which.
Okay. Well, let's all work together.
Yeah, okay.
It's all good.
That's fine.
I know how to reach you.
Micromanage. Okay. Thank you, Mitch. Have we beat this to death now?
I do have a request for the union. When the time comes that the committee has a recommendation to the board, I would also like to know, what the union's recommendation is.
Okay.
2 sentences, you know, whatever it is, but officially what the union's recommendation is, so that there's no question about, you know, what the union wanted, because it's, you know, kind of a local political problem I want to avoid and nip in the bud and just have in front of us what the union said in writing that they wanted or supported.
It also tells the public.
And it also tells the public, and I also would want to avoid, and I'm not criticizing you of this at all, Lance, but would want to avoid, you know, a future where, you know, township board put something on the ballot, we're out there campaigning for it, and there's something like, well, what the union really wanted, really needed, and what the firefighters really thought they needed for their safety was this, not this. Because that in fact was our reality the last time we went from 0.9 to 1.35. And if we had just been more upfront about it, I think all of us could have messaged that better. So, and if the union disagrees, that's great. Let's just have it all up there. Is that fair, Lance?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Lance, does that mean you have to sit down with all the firefighters and explain it to them?
No, I think I'll get it.
Huh?
No, I didn't know. I think some of them have been paying attention to what we're doing over here and ask how it's going on this and that, how we've been discussing stuff.
I've been to one of your high-powered meetings.
Yeah, they're pretty laid back.
Case of beer.
There's
only 9.
They're pretty intense.
I think it was 6 a.m. on a Sunday or something.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. All right, so we'll give our edits to the chief. He'll compile them and
Work with the clerk to address her,
Input.
yeah, yes, thank you.
all right, that I think takes care of presentations, discussions, old business and new business. So, public comment. Right?
Yep.
Any public have any comments?
Please raise your Zoom hand or just start speaking.
I don't see.
All right. I see no Zoom hands. Oh, there's one. That's all I had to say. Pam.
Thank you. Just thank you for all of your due diligence and hard work. I appreciate it.
You too, Pam. Thank you.
Thanks for your research, Pam. Anything else? Anyone else?
Nope.
All right. Move to adjourn.
Support.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Let's stick around this.
All right, not me. I gotta find it.
Thanks, everybody.
It's a long drive.